Afternoon, everyone. It's a great honor for me to be here in this region. I flew in from the UK yesterday. I represent a very small organization that owns 2 schools in the UK and a 6th form college. We're really interested in learning from other regions, despite being sequestered on our island, hence my being here. And it's a great honor to be with 5 experts. So, having listened all morning to innovation trends in this region and into the Southeast Asia region, I think we're all probably going to ask the question quite rightly at this stage, who's investing in these trends and what is happening actually in the region? Specifically, I think this panel will address the UAE and MENA. You've heard the introductions. We're going to look at about 5 key trends or key questions. We'll leave a bit of time at the end for questions and answers, about 10 minutes. And I'm going to kick off with an overview. I'm going to ask the panel to give me an overview of the current state of the education sector here in the UAE and in the MENA region specifically. So over to Ashwin. We'll start with Ashwin. We're going to have to share our mics a bit.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
Is it working?
Hopefully you can hear me now. Yeah. So I think I've had the pleasure of covering the sector in the UAE and the region for over 14 years now, and I think what we've seen is a very strong development of the private sector across the entire education value chain, from pre-K through to K-12, higher education, and now EdTech as well. I think the most notable changes have been that initially the investment was coming in from mom and pop operators, families, then it sort of started moving on to family funds, and then there were small regional private equity firms investing, and now we're seeing global capital through some of the large school chains especially, and the universities being invested in this region. So we've seen a big wall of capital coming into the region, but from different sources. And it's actually become more sophisticated and more institutional in nature over the best part of the last 10 years.
Thank you. Thank you. Sharam, I think you also specifically wanted to address what's happening in Saudi Arabia with regards to trends.
Sure. Thank you very much. Very happy to be here. As Ashwin said, the region as a whole is growing, particularly in Saudi Arabia. You have a couple different factors. One, you obviously have the growth that's there. You're seeing the economic growth. You're seeing a shift from the government going from promoting the private sector. There's been reforms coming into the private sector. We're one of the beneficiaries of that coming in with being backed by the Royal Commission of Riyadh City and the Ministry of Investment, who supported us in entering into the market. Obviously, the market is a large market, 38 million people, strong GDP growth, and the government, although they're spending quite a bit, 17% of the annual budget was spent on education, the government's still not seeing the full results in improvement of education. That's where we in the private sector come in to support that growth and really bring in a higher quality of education. And the market is growing, but you still need to know the lay of the land and be on the ground and really understand how to maneuver. But there's a huge growth opportunity in Saudi Arabia.
Very interesting. Dr. Pablo Feta, do you see the same kind of trend regionally?
Most definitely. I remember I moved to the UAE about 16 years ago, 17 years ago. And moving from Europe to the UAE, I was excited about the chances I got, the opportunities I got professionally. Great job, great pay, no taxes. I was amazed. The only thing that I was concerned is that the education of my son, that I would be doing a kind of a step down from coming from Europe to the UAE. Well, it turned out to be exactly the opposite. It turned out to be an amazing journey for my son who got educated here. If you have seen the latest statistics of the latest results published by KHDA, that the private K-12 sector in Dubai, if Dubai would be an independent country and it would, if you would benchmark it against the PISA results worldwide, Dubai would be number 9 in I think in math, number 14 I think in reading, and number 15 in science, if I recall correctly. So, spectacular results, especially compared to 15 years ago, and that has come on the back of a great increase in the quality and a great increase in the offerings that you have here. And just to close with a quick remark on the numbers. This year, the education sector has grown like in no other year in the past by 12%, which means that we went from 326,000 students to 366,000 students in 1 year. That's 40,000 students. 40,000 students extra in Dubai in 1 year. If you consider that a school has a typical size of, on average, 1,500 students, that means that basically 27 schools you could have filled up with new students that got into the school system this year only in Dubai. And that's only Dubai. You have all the other Emirates and Saudi is another great opportunity altogether.
Extraordinary growth that we're witnessing here in this region. It's a standout, I think, globally. So in terms of key trends, we've heard a lot about key trends in innovation in education, technological advancements, for example, driving this. But the question here really for us is what is shaping the sector and the investment landscape around innovation? And I'm going to ask Walid to answer that because he specializes in private equity and investment into technology.
Thank you, Claudia. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. I'm actually a venture capitalist. I co-founded MEVP about 15 years ago. We're the first tech VC company in the Arab world, headquartered here in Dubai, and focused on the technology opportunity. We've invested and backed a lot of tech companies, and we always bet on trends. Our job is to see, or at least try to see what's going to come next and bet behind the tech companies of the future. So the education sector in particular, technology is not new in education. The internet itself is an educational product. But what has happened is that throughout the past 10 years, the business models and the adoptions and the way we consume the internet has changed. So if you take an industry like, for instance, retail has been heavily disrupted by e-commerce. And there's no doubt about that. You go to anyone today, tell them you don't have an e-commerce store. If they say no, they're basically living in the dinosaur ages. Same thing has happened in finance and banking. The fintech took all over that industry. And I can go on and how the last 10 years have transformed every industry out there. I'm afraid to say that the education industry is probably the last to change. It doesn't mean it's not adopting software, but it means it's not adopting the last trends that has happened. So a key trend that we focus on is customization of learning. I think it's unfair that you can put so much technology to customize your pizza that's going to come to your door, and there's nothing that's done towards the customization of your learning journeys. So you go to a school, it's a black box, it's a curricula, you leave out of it, that's it, right? If you need to do an incredible amount of work to customize your education journey, whether you're a lifelong learner or K-12 or anywhere in that spectrum. Second, the costs. The costs, actually, the internet, the biggest opportunity of the internet is to democratize. The cost of education has been skyrocketing over the past years, which is an opportunity for investors because with democratization, we can provide an incredible amount of learning possibilities to students and teachers around the world. 3, teachers. We are seeing a lot of frustrated teachers all over the spectrum, whether it's their income level, whether it's their ability to them customize their journeys and also be attached to their mission. For business models, schools today, specifically we're in Dubai, where you have a lot of these big school groups, there is not one school group that is not trying to IPO. So we have schools that are actually now publicly listed companies. And if you're a banker or an investor and you read their prospect, every one of them speaks about digitization in their prospectus, because it's a driver of growth, of retention, of income, etc., etc. So what are we doing vis-a-vis these trends? We're trying to invest into the infrastructure technologies that allow this digitization to happen, that allow this customization to happen. This means that the school, teacher, parents, students, that value chain has to be receptive to these new models. Things like hybrid learning, things like tracking, things like the use of artificial intelligence, things like simply use of certain fintech tools, because it's also you need to monetize. So there's an incredible amount of wealth, and I'm not addressing the content. The content on its side is a play on its own. So we're very excited. We're investing heavily in that space. We are seeing a lot of more receptive avant-garde schools that are looking towards introducing hybrid models, being more of mentors and counselors, and moving a bit away from the classroom black box product that I think we all grew up to know. And that's an incredible opportunity for a EdTech venture capital investor.
Thank you, Walid. Does anyone on the panel want to comment on what Walid has said specifically? Well, I'll move on to the next, the third area then, which is really, it's relating back to what you're talking about, disruption in education, emerging trends, etc., Walid. Specifically online learning platforms, skills-based education, and personalized learning. And Dr. Pablo Feta, you were going to comment about what KDHA is doing in this regard, just as a case study.
In particular, I mean, I agree with everything Walid said. I'm an engineer myself and ended up in education management and investments in education, but I've always kept kind of a heart for the application of technology in different sectors. And coming into education, I was surprised to see how the classrooms today resemble very much the classrooms from back in my days, 40 years ago or so. I think that COVID was a huge accelerator in the introduction of technologies. All of a sudden, schools had to implement distance learning protocols in a very short period of time, and they had to basically learn by doing. And there's been a lot of progress, a lot of things that have been adopted from the COVID experience in terms of application of new technologies in the school environment. When it comes to, in particular, when it comes to personalization, that is an area that is very exciting, I find. And in fact, KHDA, which is the regulator of the private school sector here in Dubai, has put personalization as one of their 4 key priorities for this year. The idea is that enabled by technology, you address the specific strengths and weaknesses of every student. And that's something that technology is enabling today that wasn't possible, at least at the same level as it is today before the application of technology.
Thank you. It suddenly occurred to me, Walid, that private equity might have another agenda here, and that's around returns on investment. Could you comment on that and sort of just, you've mentioned that education is the least disrupted sector for technology. So how patient is private equity with regards to its investment into this kind of sector, or these trends in this sector?
First of all, we're not talking about a public environment here. We're talking in an environment where group schools are for-profit companies, and they're actually going public. I didn't push them to go public. That's their mission. By going public, they're going to seek investors. They're not going to seek charities, right? So those investors are going to look at those companies as businesses. So what is the agenda? Is returns. What does that mean? That means that you have to build a business that has an interesting return profile. And that's fine because this is happening all over the world. And this is life. I believe that what I come back to this point, software and tech has been in the school since the invention of the internet. It's just the past few years, especially after COVID, that we realized that this whole infrastructure of technology has to be upgraded to meet the expectations of customers today, students, parents, etc. And that work that hasn't been done because that work needs to reinvent the whole business model. Do I have to sign up for a full tuition fee to take the curricula as is? Can I customize? Can I be self-directed learner? Can I be on and off? Can I be in my classroom or can I be with other classrooms? Should I have multiple equivalences all over the world? Those are questions that are being asked and done by parents around the world. So the homeschooling movement in the UK is doubling every year, 100% growth. Why? Frustration from the schooling system, more customization, woke movement, I don't know. US, California, same story. You have people like Elon Musk advocating for full customization and they have the means to do it. So something is going on there. I'm not the best reference in that area to identify its questions, but definitely there is an opportunity to, I guess, address those emerging needs. And that's what I'm trying to do.
I think if I could challenge one of those premises, is that what we saw, and I think the previous panel was discussing this, is that with COVID, we saw the parents want the kids to go back to school. We actually saw the isolation and homeschooling have a negative impact on the student well-being, on emotional well-being, on being able to adapt to other children, and really lack of learning. A lot of people got left behind because of COVID. So the school building is not going away, right? So people are still gonna have to come to school, be with their classmates, particularly at the younger ages. Now, high school and university might be different, particularly as these are young adults and they can be more self-learners. But when we're talking about younger students, they have to come into the classroom. They have to come to school. Now, the school building will change, will be innovative. We will have technologies there, AI, headsets, different type of immersion technologies to help with the content, to help with the learning. But the school building is not going away. Just the function inside the school building will be different.
What are the factors driving investment interest in the region? So what are the key factors here that you are seeing, and the others will chip in?
Yeah, as Cognita, we came into the region only in 2021. At this point of time, 3 years back, we had no schools in the Middle East. So today we have about 9 schools across Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Kuwait, and about 14,000 students, and revenue of about 800 million dirhams, equivalent. So what we looked at when we looked at the region is the growth of students, especially when we started up the region in Dubai. One of the important factor was, student growth, year on year. And if you look at the data, last 3 years, Dubai added about 80,000 students, post-COVID, and last year alone about 40,000, and prior to that about 25,000. So yeah, I think that was one of the important factor, the growth of students in the private sector here. And the other important factor is, the multiples expectation in this region compared to rest of the world is quite reasonable, I would say. If you look at North America or Europe or Asia, the expectation of multiple is very high, whereas here, a quality school you can get for a lower multiple as well. I think that was one of the criteria. And I think favorable tax regime here, there is a corporate tax, there is a VAT, but I think compared to rest of the world, I think it's still very, very reasonable, I would say. And I think the latest, if you look at the latest regime changes in terms of golden visa, aspect, which helps, people to stay longer in the region. So yeah, I mean, these are the factors I would say, what's helped us at least, in terms of, growing in this region.
If I may, just to elaborate on that, Rajesh. So the last couple of years have been absolutely bombastic for schools, right? So during COVID, a lot of groups got affected by the economic difficulties that COVID brought with itself, and that might have moved some people to decide to sell. And you had great timing to come into the market at exactly
Correct.
that time when there were lots of people reconsidering and looking at potentially sell. Now that business is so good, have you seen the deal flow become less attractive because people are no longer forced to sell?
Yeah, it's not the same. I agree with your point there, because when you look at the timings of our transactions, we have done our first school here right in the beginning of COVID, and we opened RGS, for example, right in the middle of COVID, and towards the end of COVID, I think we acquired a couple more schools, and yeah, I mean, when you look at the cost of the transactions now, if you want to acquire a land or lease a land, I think prices have gone up by 50% and 100% in some places, and expectation on the multiples have increased. But still, I think because the other factors like returns will still stack up. Even if you are paying a slightly higher multiple, I think returns for the shareholders will still stack up, because your enrollment trends are much better, and you will be able to fill up your schools. You can look for expansion opportunities within the school. So these factors will again work in your favor.
Thank you very much. Ashwin, have you got any observations on the factors driving investment trends here?
Yeah, I think it's all of the things that Rajesh spoke about. But I think the other important one is the regulatory environment, which makes life very easy for investors because there's clarity, there's transparency. You may not agree with all of the regulations in place, but at least you know what you're facing and you can plan your business accordingly. So I think that helps a great deal. I think some of the other trends that are attracting some investors who may not have looked at this region before are that in pretty much every segment of education that the price points are drifting upwards. So 25 years ago, the market was really operating at an average price point which was significantly lower. There were a lot of Indian curriculum schools. There's a large Indian diaspora, Southeast Asian diaspora that was looking to send their kids to schools that they could, if they had to go back home, they could transport their kids back to those schools. Today, there's the long-term Dubai resident who's been here for maybe a few generations, sees it as home. And these families are increasingly choosing international education, which then operates at higher price points. So you've got sort of the premiumization, you've got a clarity of regulations. And then I think what attracts a lot of other investors is the fact that they can use this region, the UAE, as a base to then go into other markets that are in and around. So I think, Rajesh said they initially came into Dubai, they've gone into Abu Dhabi, and then Kuwait. A number of other investors and operators start with Dubai and then move into other parts of the region.
Interesting observation that these investors are seeing the real quality in education delivery here, then as a springboard into other parts of the region. So, Sharam, what are your observations there? So the quality of education and that upward trend in terms of delivery on quality and that attraction for investors.
Well, I think Ashwin's absolutely right. I mean, UAE has seen a huge growth in the last 1 year. And the quality of education is there. As Dr. Paulo said, the quality is increasing and it is a competitive market. I mean, for us as a school group looking to expand, for us to do a school here in UAE, we have to think about it and really look at the competitive landscape, because there is a high quality schools here that are delivering high quality education. I think within the UAE, you have to look at the segments, the super premium, the premium and mid-priced. And I think that with the growth going forward is mapping which of these segments are going to have the largest demand in the next 5 years. And that's where you can play. But the atmosphere here in the UAE is very strong, has historically been strong. I think where we see a lot of growth is obviously in Saudi Arabia, where it's more of a earlier stage, where UAE is more of a mature stage. So we're at the beginning of the journey in Saudi, where perhaps more later stage here in the UAE, but both markets are very strong and continue to see growth.
So actually it just occurred to me, do we understand the definition of quality here on the panel when we say quality education? Is it the buildings or the learning outcomes or both? Just, what is it that draws these investors in when you talk about quality?
Well, I think that as Ashwin mentioned, one of the driving factors of the growth we've had in private education, in particular in Dubai, has been the regulator, the KHDA, which came up about 15 years ago with a great, I consider, a genius alignment of interest between the interest of the government, which is to increase the quality of education, and the interest of the private operators, which is to maximize financial returns. By basically aligning first and foremost, the KHDA defined what is quality. And as Ashwin said, you might agree or disagree, but they came up with this, document, the inspection framework that has a very, very granular definition of what is quality, right? 178 pages in a document. You have to, if you run a school, you have to go through them, learn them by heart, basically, and implement all those quality standards in your school. So that's one of the transparency, the definition of what is quality. The transparency that the regulator created, that creates a level playing field, allowing everybody to optimize so that standard has been developed and set. And again, there's no use in saying I agree with this or not, because that's the standard is out there, and it doesn't matter whether you agree or not. That's how you're going to be measured, right? And then if your results as per that quality definition are good, the KHDA is going to reward you by letting you increase prices at a higher pace than inflation, right? So that alignment of interest is, I think, the secret sauce that allowed Dubai to have the spectacular increase in both revenues and numbers of schools and students, but also at the same time increasing quality.
So interesting, because really that amounts to investors looking, I think, at evidence-based standards. And I assume there's a very, very strict regime of inspections of schools here as well. So investors can turn to inspection reports, etc.
From the point of view of investors, is a beautiful thing that you can say, okay, if I can improve the quality of my school from, say, good today to very good in 3 years' time to outstanding in another 3 years' time. So in 6 years' time, I'm going from good to outstanding. Let's say you can make that call, right? Then at the same time, you would know how your revenues would be increasing along the way, right? Which is amazing, right? You're linking the quality of the product that you're offering to the revenues that you're getting. Fantastic.
Anyone else who wants to comment on that? No, I was also just thinking in terms of quality and then innovation. And we heard in the last 2 sessions, actually, quite a lot about risk-taking. So if you're a teacher in the classroom, you want to be innovative, or you're leading a school, you are going to necessarily be a little bit risk-taking. You have to be, especially when it comes to implementing technology in classrooms. It's all actually still quite new. And the outcomes still haven't been quite proven in terms of pedagogical outcomes, etc. However, we still see, despite all of that, it's unproven, untested, but lots of observations are emerging. Investors interested specifically in technological innovation in schools. So I just want to move to the next section then of the session, which is specific areas within K-12 that are driving significant growth potential in the region. Is it investment into technology in schools, or are there other areas within the sector that interest investors? So maybe over to Raj, your observations?
Yeah. See, I think we are invested in K-12 segment more. So I would talk about that more than anything on the technology side. I think when you look at different countries within the Middle East, I don't think one formula will work. You can't say that if one formula worked in Dubai, it may not work in, say, Saudi or Kuwait. You have to look at different market differently, and say, for example, if you want to today, if you want to invest in Dubai, for example, you have to look at which are the location which will be suitable for you, and which is the curriculum which is growing fastest in Dubai, and which is the segment you want to invest in, and you have to do a deep dive analysis into all these aspects and choose which area you want to be. Ashwin, we quite often take help from Ashwin and Elike to do these kind of analysis. I think if you want to be successful in different countries and different cities in the Middle East, I think each of the countries you have to do this analysis and choose the right segment, right curriculum, and right price point, and then start your project. Otherwise, just because your projects are successful in Dubai doesn't mean that it will be successful in, say, for example, Saudi or Kuwait. So you have to adapt according to the market conditions.
I mean, from our perspective, that's 100% correct. I think within the K through 12, you have different areas where you can play. Obviously, you have the pricing, which we talked to super premium, premium, and mid-price, but also different specialty K through 12. So us as Alderman Education Group, we're very interested in looking at special needs, where we see a big market opportunity in let's say, Saudi Arabia. We're very much interested in developing an early years platform and growing that. We're looking at some specialty K through 12. So even within the K through 12 space, there's differentiation between price and the offerings and curriculum. And regarding the innovation and technology, I would say those are things that we see a lot of different platforms. It's hard to understand which one is going to be the winner, right? Which one's going to be the winner in which space. So I think there is a bit of a trial and error to see which of these technologies is going to come out on top. But really, I think the technology is there to deliver the education, not the other way around. So the technologies assist the delivery of the education, delivery of your vision and your curriculum and what you want to get across, such as personalization and so forth that was discussed today. So I think those things can enhance the classroom experience.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think there's a lot of opportunity, again, across the region to build and buy schools and improve them across various price points or across curricula. You don't actually have to do anything particularly innovative. People always say, come up with something innovative. Actually, you don't, not with K-12. There's enough legs to the market. The market's growing strongly enough for you to be able to do another school, high quality, know how to attract your parents, know how to keep your teachers happy and your students happy, and you will be very successful. When it comes to technology, I think a couple of things to take note of. Everyone gets very excited by the B2C kind of, my son downloaded an app and he really likes using it. Well, the cost of customer acquisition with a B2C offering is very, very high, especially in a region like this, because no market is large enough. I mean, when you look at markets like the US or even India or China, these are huge markets. The addressable market's huge. So there's a lot to play for. But many of these businesses are still not profitable. So if you go down the route of building an edtech product, it has to be B2B. You have to be selling into schools, universities, colleges, somebody. But if your product cannot be explained within 45 seconds to the person that owns the school and explain in a way where he or she understands the benefit either to the student or to the parent or to the teacher, then it's not a product worth continuing with. So I speak to so many school leaders, university leaders who are engulfed with products from all over the world, salespeople coming down, and they don't have the attention span to take it in, but also there's just so much stuff out there that it's hard for them to process. How will it actually help me run the school better and be more valuable to my stakeholders? So if you're doing anything in an edtech investment in K-12, you need to be able to make sure that the owner is happy and the headmistress is happy and really wants to put that product in the school.
Any observations, Dr. Vetter, on the matter?
I think that Ashwin put it in perfect words. No, so I have nothing to add.
One question I've got for the panel, which is just, in fact, I'm living this experience at the moment with the two schools that we own in the UK. It's a really interesting model of private-public financing. We were discussing this, Sharam, you and I, a little earlier. So we have a specialist centre in each of our private schools that is funded by the local authority. And it actually drives a lot of revenues back into the school. The rest of the revenue comes from the parents, and they are under some strain at the moment back in the UK, cost of living. We're really concerned. We're watching a trend where actually there's an enormous move out of the private school sector into the state school sector, which is actually not a bad sector at all in the UK. About only 7% of kids in the UK go to private schools, for example, and that is a very competitive market. But we are delivering specialist support areas that are financed by the state, and they seem quite happy to be operating with us in the private equity-backed, I might add, sector. Is there any possibility of that happening here in the region, or any observations?
I can talk about on the Saudi side, and I think Ashwin and one on the UAE side. But on the Saudi side, the government, special needs is a big area that needs attention. It's a very underserved market, although unfortunately, there's a large proportion of the population that has special needs, but it's being underserved. And there's a lot of things looking at it now, but currently there isn't that government support as far as large financial subsidies that will allow, because the subsidies that are being provided to the parents are less than what we could deliver that education to that individual, that student. So in the UK, you have larger numbers, several £100,000 a year, where we don't have that in the region right now. So as far from a KSA, and I think Ashwin and the team could talk about the UAE, there isn't that government level of support, of subsidy to say, like, we're about to pay X amount, and that X right now is less than what it costs to deliver those services. So from a private sector perspective, coming into identifying where in special needs we can play is quite difficult.
Yeah, I think in terms of what's happening in the UAE, I'm not so sure about the special needs, and that I don't think there's that much funding there. But in terms of public-private partnerships, you will see the emergence of charter schools more in Abu Dhabi than in Dubai. Of course, there's the Dubai Schools Initiative here, which is ramping up. But ADEC is leading its charter schools and is working with private operators to deliver education to local Emiratis using their buildings, using the buildings of the public sector, but with the teachers recruited by the private sector. So the private sector acts as a management contracts out and runs the school for the public sector. And that's become more popular for some of the operators to get involved with. But it's still a tiny sliver, and it's a small percentage of the revenues for those private operators. I think most private operators, Rajesh, you can correct me if I'm wrong, would rather prefer to build their own school or buy their own school and own it and operate it.
Yeah, I suspect it's a complicated model to run, that partnership model. And then if you're an equity investor, it's just how easy is it to extract your returns on investment, I guess.
Yeah, and also it's quite small relative to the kinds of returns you would have if you had your own school. So there are operators that will get involved in it, but will it become a big part of anyone's revenue picture? No. And will companies set up to dedicate themselves to running charter schools? We haven't seen it yet.
I mean, the charter schools it's a US model, isn't it? You see it in quite a lot of states within the states where there's low income groups that the kids tend to land up in those schools. So it's again a very different context to your point, Raj. You can't extrapolate and generalize about trends without looking at context first. So yeah. I want to open up to the floor very quickly before we end, because I'm sure there's some questions. So yeah, Q&A session. At the front there. I think there's a mic coming your way. At least I hope there's a mic. Yeah.
Thank you. So my question is to any of the panelists. This is regarding, we have seen that some time back, the investment in EdTech was huge, and the returns also were huge, many big companies coming up. But compared to other market. But I haven't seen in the last few, let's say a year or so, we're seeing that the investment in EdTech is of course come down. Secondly, there are no much investment coming in research and development in education as much as it's coming in medical field, etc. So there are the groups which are working on very fundamental research in AI, ML, and generative AI for school education. We are not getting that kind of fund compared to what it was earlier. So any comments on that?
Anyone want to comment on investment into EdTech in the region and the trend? Because I think that bubble kind of has burst a little bit. But
we have also seen that in medical field, people are investing for long-term R&D projects. But in education, long-term R&D projects are there, but the funding is not as much as in the medical.
Yeah. Well, I think typically what you'll see is that will happen in developed markets like the US. Here, there are universities in the region that are investing a lot in R&D. So you have KAUST, for example, in Saudi Arabia and Jeddah, which is the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, which is essentially there to develop patents. Now, it's not focused on education or on healthcare, but a whole host of industries. At NYU Abu Dhabi, there's a lot of focus on developing, there's a big R&D push there, and there's government funding. But the private sector typically will not fund R&D into education unless you're a big group and you're looking at specific things. So I think GEMS has done a few things around R&D and learning outcomes. But it's typically something that the government needs to take over. And in terms of your comment on EdTech investment coming down, actually, of course it has, because a lot of the EdTech providers have not been able to produce the most essential thing that you need in education, which is outcomes. And, Byju's, which is able to show, had been able to show great subscriber growth, never was able to show how their kids actually benefited. Were they getting better results as a result? Yeah, so it has to be outcomes based. It has to be proven, which is why schools are successful. Schools are successful because they're able to show, well, we get our kids, decent grades, we get them into decent universities. And with the universities, why is private capital going on and putting money into them? Because they're able to deliver outcomes which makes sure they can attract continuous stream of students. And the outcomes that universities deliver is employability. So anything in private education, unless you have an outcome which the student, the parent values, it's very hard to invest behind, which is why edtech investments came down significantly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the floor? No? Oh, in the front, yes, sorry.
Although this topic is around education sector, investment opportunities in UAE and MENA, but I want to ask that is UAE and MENA region also a potential hotspot for raising education investment for other countries like India, South Asia, Pakistan, or any other places. So are investors from this region investing outside this region in education, schools, or even in Africa or any other places? So how is that scope here? Because many of these participants are here from India, and they would like to know this also. That investors or HNIs who are here, are they thinking about investing in outside MENA in education?
And that's a great question. In the previous boom, up until the global financial crisis, there were quite a few funds that established their headquarters here in Dubai that would have a regional focus to invest either in the MENA region or in the MENA region plus the subcontinent, including Pakistan, including India. There was even a fund called the New Silk Route, which was supposed to encompass the entire region that was defined by the Silk Route. And but I think that this time around, in this iteration, people are more focused on the narrower region. In particular, here UAE, Saudi Arabia is attracting a lot of investments. The investors are looking at the MENA region in particular, but less so on a more supra-regional basis that would span all the way to India or South Asia. Those funds would be based in Singapore or in Asia themselves.
Sure, makes sense.
Time for one last question, if there's a burning question from anyone. No? Thank you very much then for your time. We've heard that quality drives pretty much everything. So quality of learning outcomes as proven for investors, etc. And we're seeing enormous strides in quality here delivered in UAE and across into the South Asia region as well. So it's been fascinating for me on a personal level to listen to you all. And I've been very honored to chair the panel. Thank you so much.